I want to start, I think, with, remind you it is Transfiguration Sunday. And I'm going to start with 3 quotes and then a story. And we'll go from there. But let me start with these 3 quotes. Matthew 17, he was transfigured. His face shone like the sun and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. From the cloud, a voice spoke, and they were overcome by fear. And then, second quote from second letter of Peter, for we did not follow cleverly devised myths, but we had been eyewitnesses of his majesty. We ourselves heard this voice come from heaven while we were with him on the holy mountain. You heard those 5 minutes ago. But then this from Rob Bell. We live in a very, very weird universe. One that is roughly 96% unknown. That's where we're starting. I recently learned of a woman who'd been in the hospital for ongoing cancer treatment. And she was lying in bed thinking she wasn't going to make it. She remembers being so low that she'd ever been before, filled with angst, despair, wondering if she was going to die soon or if it was going to be long and painful. And the night shift nurse came into her room and began to care for her with real compassion and love. And throughout the night, different times, the nurse came in and checked on her repeatedly and just whispered a word of encouragement or calmed her, reassured her, spoke to her in a way that lifted and gave her hope. So that by the morning, she had been able to go to sleep and she woke up feeling a different person, a new perspective. She asked the morning shift nurse for the name of the woman who had cared for her that night and described her. And the morning nurse said no one who fit that description worked on the floor of the hospital, not to mention that night in this cancer patient's room. So what do you do with a story like that? Some people hear a story about the woman in the hospital and immediately say, yes, of course, that was an angel taking care of her. They're all around us, watching over us and guiding us and protecting us. And then they proceed to quote verses from the Bible while they tell their little angel story. I'm trying to sound a little cynical. Is it coming across? Or I can't pull it out? I don't know. But other people hear the first group responding like this, and they roll their eyes and dismiss it all. And they're quick to point out no one has any proof of such things. So one says, of course she was an angel. And the other one says equally emphatically, angels don't exist. And Rob Bell says, we live in a very, very weird universe. One that is roughly 96% unknown. He's right, of course, that the universe is 96% unknown. Yet we're learning and discovering. This week they found 7 new planets. Did you see that? TRAPPIST-1. I think John's got, there it is. Orbiting a small star, and they're the right distance from their sun, from that star, like our Earth is from our sun, that they could conceivably have oxygen or water or life. So why don't we head out and check it out? They're 39 light years away. You know about light years? Light travels at the speed 186,000 miles per second. So in a year, how many seconds are there? 186,000 times how many thousand seconds in a year? There's 30. It's out there. None of us will ever get there and back. Just not happening. But the discovery has thrilled astronomers, raised hopes that the hunt for alien life beyond the solar system could start much sooner than we previously thought, because even though they're 39 light years away, they're closer and they have the best possibility than anything we've discovered so far. And with the next generation of telescopes that are due to switch on in the next decade, we may be able to see more clearly what's going on those planets. The universe is a very, very weird place, which is 96% unknown, but we're making progress. Of course, this quest has gone on in both directions toward the vastness out there, but also not just to stars and solar systems and galaxies, the reverse, also what's at the root of it all here. For thousands of years, people have wondered what the universe is made of, assuming they're... Excuse me, I got hot tea up here. I'm having a little... People have been wondering, assuming there must be some kind of building block, a particle, a basic element, a cosmic Lego of sorts. Something really small and stable that makes up everything we know to be everything. That was the quest that compelled scientists and philosophers and thinkers for thousands of years until the late 1800s, when atoms were eventually discovered. By the way, I just want to reassure you, I'm going to get back to Jesus on the mountain, but we're going down this rabbit hole for a little while. All right? Atoms, it turns out, are very, very small. About 1 million atoms. Now, I'm going to throw stuff at you and just shut your eyes and try to picture this. 1 million atoms lined up side by side is about the width of a hair. I won't give you one of mine because they're going fast enough. But atoms, it was discovered, are made up of even smaller parts called protons and grade 11 physics, right? We remember this. Protons, neutrons, electrons. The protons and neutrons are in the center of the atom called the nucleus, which is 1/millionth of a billionth of the volume of the atom. Now, you can't picture that, 1/millionth of the billionth. But get your mind around this. This is a visual image. If an atom were enlarged to the size of a stadium, the Sky Dome, you take that one atom, enlarge it to be the Sky Dome, the nucleus of the atom would still be the size of a grain of rice. But it would weigh more than the stadium, the Sky Dome, because that nucleus is so dense and heavy. Brains reeling? Some of you know this stuff already. The discoveries continued as technology was developed to split those particles, which led to discovery that those particles were actually made of even smaller particles. And then technology was developed to split those, discovered those were actually made up even smaller, and then technology was developed to split those. Down and down it went, smaller and smaller, into the subatomic world. New technology and research are constantly emerging. For me, the most impressive being the 16-mile circular tunnel that's 100 yards under the earth on the Swiss-French border. Have you heard about this? They're firing, I'm not sure what the particles are, but they're firing two beams at each other in this circular tunnel, hoping that they'll collide and new particles will emerge. So, the staggeringly tiny size of atoms and subatomic particles is hard to get one's mind around, but it's what those particles do. Here's where I'm going with this. It's what those particles do that forces us to confront our most basic assumptions about the universe. Popular image of the atom. This is out of my grade 11 physics, or grade 13. In my day, we still had grade 13. And A lot of you have seen this, right? Or something like it. The protons and neutrons in the center, like the sun, and the electrons orbiting in a path around center. But scientists have learned this really is completely inaccurate. It's not a true depiction of how things actually are. What they learned is that electrons don't orbit the nucleus in a continuous and consistent manner. What they do is they disappear in one place and then appear in another place without traveling the distance between. They just disappear and appear. Particles vanish and then show up somewhere else, leaping from one location to another with no way to predict when or where they will come or go. Particles are constantly in motion. It's an energy force and they're in motion exploring all the possible paths from point A to point B at the same time. These particles are simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Electrons exist in what are called ghost states, exploring all of the possible routes from A to B that they could take until they're observed, at which point all of those possibilities collapse into the one route they actually took. So, what's that mean? What's that look like when it's at home? Well, have you ever stood on a sidewalk in front of a store window and seen your reflection in the glass? You can see the items there in the display window. You can see those, but you can also see yourself there, like kind of a fuzzy mirror. Some of the light particles from the sun, called photons, went through the glass, and they illuminated whatever's on display. And you see clearly what the shop is selling. But some of the particles from the sun didn't pass through the glass, but essentially they bounced off, allowing you to see your reflection. Why did a certain particle go through the glass and a certain other particle not? It can't be predicted. Or let me try, and this is my last illustration, and then we're going to get back to Jesus on the Mount. But have you ever seen those pictures that have a dual image? Depends on where you look from, depends on your angle, will determine what you see. John, hold that picture. Wait. I want to ask you, you see this? Depending on your angle, whatever angle you are in the light, okay, give the first one. You might be seeing that. All right? But if you're sitting, some of you aren't seeing that, you're seeing that. Now let me see if I can do this. Is that changing anything? Back row, forget it. You should have paid more and got up here. Kidding. Oops, that was bad. I apologize. Oh, okay. Forgive me my trespasses. I don't know if you can see any of that. The brilliant thing is John came in yesterday and made a little video, and he walked by and showed from different angles. So John, can you just run that? That's him with his camera, just going like this. 2 different images. See it? See it? Isn't that amazing? That's one, clearly, Jesus praying over the earth. And there's the King Jesus with the crown. And look at that. That's just John going with his camera like this. I love it. And on your way out later, you can come up and take a look at that. All right. So, let me first cycle back to the woman in the cancer ward and the mysterious nurse who cared for her in the night. Some say it was an angel, and some would decisively dismiss that out of hand, saying people and things don't appear from nowhere. The problem with that statement is we now know they do. Subatomic particles, we've learned, actually do disappear in one place and reappear in another without traveling the distance between. We live in a very, very weird universe, 96% of which is unknown. Strange things do happen, things with no precedent and no explanation, every single day, every single moment, billions and billions of times a second, all around us. Light travels in a straight line, and it bends and curves. Time is inconsistent and relative and bends depending on where you are and what speed you're traveling in the universe. The cosmos is curved and moving and expanding and interacting. And if Earth were slightly closer to the sun, we'd all cook, or slightly farther away, we'd all freeze. So to be closed-minded to anything that does not fit our little categories, our predetermined categories, is to deny the real experiences that are happening in the world. We're here. This is real. Subatomic particles travel all possible paths and then choose one when they're observed. And there is no precedent or predicting such a thing. Now, I'm not telling you this to avoid important things like evidence and proof and logic. This is the tacit acknowledgement, however, that some events, experiences, and truths simply exist outside of those particular verifiable categories. So to believe that there's more going on here, that there may be a reality beyond what we can comprehend, I think that's being open, and I think that's being wise. You remember the whimsical way the Irish acknowledge this truth? They talk about the thin places. And what they mean is there is this visible, verifiable world that we can see clearly, touch, and experience. But maybe there's an other unseen, but very real. And sure, isn't there a veil, a curtain between us, just there, between us and it? And every once in a while we catch a glimpse through the curtain on the other side. The veil is thin enough to see through. An event draws the curtain back, and we see a glimpse. Something happens, a loved one passes, but then there comes a moment of comforting clarity, and we glimpse her on the other side just for a moment. So, I picture those disciples trudging up the mountain with Jesus. Maybe they're thinking they're going up the mountain to get a better view out over the world. People sometimes use mountains for that. And in a sense, that's just what happened. But not in the way the disciples had expected it. There they were, walking alongside Jesus, who from all appearances looked fairly much like them, a man among men, a fellow Jew, gifted teacher perhaps. But then there on the mountain, he was transfigured for a moment before them. They caught a vision, a glimpse. They heard a voice. For one moment, the routine expectations of mundane, ordinary, everyday appearances were peeled back. And they saw Jesus as the long-promised Savior, the Christ, the the one from God. And when they walked back down that mountain, they walked back into what for them now was a different world, a reality now considerably expanded. They'd seen something more. Beyond the pale, behind the veil, they saw the true reality that was hidden undiscovered by the rest of the world. Just a wee glimpse. I'm wondering, here in the 21st century, I wonder if our infatuation with facts and data and empirical proof has caused our vision to shrink rather than expand. As a minister, listening to you, listening to myself, I believe that there is more happening in you, more going on in me than science and technology has ever and will ever be able to grasp. We long for more. And in our better moments, we know there is more going on in the world, more going on in us than clinical research is able to identify or document. And maybe that's why you're here on a Sunday. Maybe one of the most helpful things about church is that here is one place we can have the courage to ask the questions and explore the mystery, to venture forth into that too little discussed territory called the supernatural, called divine, the holy, called God. The minister noticed her at church over several weeks. She hadn't been there for a while. So he asked her, "What's brought you here after so long an absence?" "A feeling," she said. "A feeling of being drawn towards something, someone. A feeling of which I wasn't clear about until last Sunday." "Last Sunday," he said. "Last Sunday, toward the end of the service, we were all standing as usual, and as usual, the choir was singing, 'Go now in peace.' And I got taken up." "Taken up?" "Yeah, like taken away. I lost consciousness, or maybe gained some new consciousness. It was as if I were alone, standing in the church, bathed in this soft, warm, wonderful light. And when I came to, the choir was finishing their singing. And I was genuinely surprised to see people standing there with me. And I had to sit down to regain my composure. And I smiled because I knew. I believe. I believe. Amen.